Before I begin the shir, let me just dedicate the shir. This shir should be a blessing and a merit for the health and success of the families of Regina Bas Yosef Reuven and Yeshaya ben Yisrael, Benjamin Wolf, ben Tzvi Hirsch, and Baruch ben Benjamin Wolf. And they should all have a tremendous chus from the shir. And also I want to dedicate the shir to Refuah Shlema for Esther Lieber Bas Chaya Yafa should have Refuah Shlema. Okay. I decided that for this year, I thought I was going to give another shir, but I decided that there's something that everybody really has to be aware of. And as a result of that, for their benefit, they have to really, in many ways, make a choice. Next week, the United States of America is going to have a pivotal election. But this is not merely an election for the President of the United States and the Vice President and so on. This election will determine the future in many ways of America. And when I mean future, I don't mean just political. I mean moral, ethical, spiritual, a host of challenges that is really coming up for next week's election. So I thought I would talk about this election, but not from the standpoint of politics. So I really have to tell you a disclaimer. I don't work for Donald Trump, obviously. I never met him. Certainly there's no influence that he has, and that's important. So what I'm about to say tonight has nothing to do with my personal feelings about he as a candidate for the presidency. What it's all about is who, and this is the title, who should you vote for and why from the perspective of the divine plan of creation. That is what this year is going to be all about. So, from that perspective, you have to make a decision. Now, you may say to yourself, is there such a perspective from the divine plan that can actually affect me? And the answer is yes. Especially this type of election, So the disclaimer is, I'm not giving this shir in any which way as a political endorsement. I mean, personally, my feelings are that he would make a great president. I've said that. And not only that, but that I believe that he will initiate, in many ways, a messianic process. Because it's not only that he would become president, he will also rid America of a very evil force, namely the Democratic Party, which is really represented by Biden and Harris and all the other people that wish to do tremendous evil in the eyes of God. But in any case, but that's my personal feelings. But that's not the theme of tonight. The theme of tonight is something entirely different, which I want to talk about. And I want to, in many ways, warn you that there is a connection in terms of who you will vote for and your eternal life. Sounds pretty radical, I know that. But I will show you that, this election can be a tremendous trap in terms of what happens to you in the next world. Very important, and so on. So this is what I wish to do, to provide this year as a warning that you have to think about before you make a choice. Hopefully you have not made the choice yet, although obviously that's really what's happening, and so on. In any case, so how do we begin? Well, the first thing is the divine plan. What's the bottom line? Well, the bottom line of the divine plan is that God wants you, human beings, to have infinite bliss eternally. That's really the whole bottom line. That's what he wants. Like I said, to have infinite bliss, which means enjoyment, pleasure, an incredible positive experience eternally, means forever. Now, we don't really know what forever means. We certainly can never imagine what forever means. But that's what the objective and the goal of what Judaism says is the basic plan. And this world is the wherewithal to get that eternal life with the infinite bliss. So that is the perspective, very simple, of what it's all about. So now you're probably wondering, well, what does that have to do with me? I mean, other than the fact that you want to have infinite bliss eternally, and so on, It has a lot to do with you and how you vote. And that's what I really want to talk about. So, what I want to say is something very important. And most people have no concept really what it's all about. There are certain fundamental laws of the universe. For instance, gravity. Gravity is a fundamental law. All things or all bodies, matter, attract each other. We don't know how. They're still trying to figure it out. There are different theories, Einstein's theories and quantum physics and so on. But essentially, the phenomenon of gravity is universal. It's all over. And it's not only that, but it's basic. It's a fundamental law, If you jump off the roof, guess what? You go straight down, right? There are other universal laws, obviously. Now, there is, however, a universal law in terms of spirituality. What is that? And that is, and I'm not going to dwell on it, but that is a concept that everybody must earn their own future world. And there's a lot of devices that God uses to assist you, which is true. But basically, the concept of din, or justice, is what rules the entire creation, especially humanity. In other words, if you want the future world, God says you have to earn it, right? It's not a gift. The gift is that He's enabling you to earn it. That is the gift. But you have to earn it. It will not be given to you as a freebie. Okay, and there's a whole understanding of that and so on. But whether we like it or not, and I'm sure we don't like it, we much would rather have had the future world, as a gift eternally. It would be incredible. But for whatever reason, God decided at the beginning of creation that the world is ruled through din, justice. What does that mean? That means that you are given the ability freely, free will, to cause physical phenomenon or phenomena. Right. We can actually cause things that God does not put in our mind to do. That's free will, without getting into the whole phenomenon of free will. But that's what it means. We are a true cause of events. Not all events, it's important, but we have a range of free will, which means we have a range of things that we can do truly cause, that is not mandated or is not decided by God or directed. Very important concept. Therefore, what justice demands is that whatever you do, you need to undo. That's what justice really is. Now, so if what you do is something which will bring to you positive results, that's great. Then the reward is based on what you did. But what happens if you do something negatively and you truly caused harm or negativity or whatever, or damage, right? You need to undo that before you can move on to the future world. That's a very important concept. It doesn't sound like it's complicated, but it's enormously significant. You see. So remember, this is a universal cosmic, basic law of the entire creation that we are subject to. Very important idea, and so on. But that obviously will bring certain ideas. The question is, who judges us when we do cause? What happens if you cause suffering to somebody else? Right? Then he suffers. That's called bein Adam l'chaveroi. You have committed a sin between man and man. The other side is bein Adam l'makam, between you and God. Fine. So if you do a sin or something negative, so God will judge you, and whatever he does, he will cause you to undo what you did, and therefore justice will have been satisfied. If, however, you make somebody suffer, that's a sin between man and man, right? Bein Adam l'chaveroi, and you have to undo that. And basically, that's the whole concept in many ways of one of the things that we have to think about on Yom Kippur, right? How do you undo the harm, the slander, the pain, the agony, the anguish that you caused others? So there's a whole process in that without going into the process, fine. But you have to know that that is a main consideration for your eligibility of the future world. That whatever you cause negatively must be undone for you to move forward into the future world. That is the fact, and you have to recognize that. Now, the question is this, okay, what does God judge then? Well, God knows instantly everything you are going to do, which future. He knows everything that you did, down to the, let's use the word nanometer. He knows everything you did, the motive, the thought, the unstated idea, everything. But what's also interesting is something I will tell you that most people don't understand. You see, well, cause what? Well, there are things that you can cause, for instance, right, that you directly caused. You walk over to a guy and you push him and he falls and injures himself. Well, guess what? You were the direct cause. It's pretty simple to see, right? Okay. But what happens if, let's say, you damage the sidewalk and you don't tell anybody about it, and somebody comes and he falls because of your damage? You created a bore, let's say a pit in the main street. Somebody comes and falls into the pit and really harms himself. You are a cause, but not direct, although you created the instrument that will harm somebody, you see. Then there are other causes where you are remotely connected. You know, for instance, you can, I give an example. For instance, you can steal from a company, you see, and because you stole from a company, that company, it loses its profit margin because of the theft that you did. This goes on all the time. And you're a shareholder in that company, and the stock price goes down. Well, who caused that? You did. But that's not a direct cause, really, because you just did something to the company. That's the direct cause. Let's say you broke an item that's required for their manufacturing, or you stole something, right? But automatically, there's what's called a consequence to this. And therefore, what's the connection between you and the consequence? In other words, what's the degree of connection between you and that consequence? Well, God knows exactly what the connection is. He knows what the degree is. And therefore, to that extent, he will judge you, and you have to undo that connection, because that's also justice. You see, it won't be as bad as if you walked over to somebody and you threw him into a pit. No. But you are what's called an indirect cause or a remote cause. But justice demands that you undo that too. Right? It's quite logical. Only God, not only does he know everything of what you did, and he doesn't take bribes, but he also knows everything you are doing and everything you will do. But he could also determine instantly the connection that you have to the event, seemingly, that you caused, no matter how remote that is. You see? And there are many remote causes that a person can be guilty of and so on. Yet God knows instantly the connection, and therefore he knows the judgment. You see? You have to undo this. This is a universal principle. Very important to understand. That justice demands that everything we caused, certainly if it's negative, right, we must undo. Now, one of the ways of undoing is suffering. That's the concept called atonement or kapara. You know, there are two ways to undo. One is to repent, and the miracle is that, you mean, if I repent, God will remove the sin or whatever? And the answer is yes, depending on the sin that you did. That's a tremendous chesed, kindness, you see. But what happens if you don't do tshuva, which is repentance, and therefore you're not atoned, right? So God has created a concept called suffering, pain, anguish or agony, and so on, you see. And he will administer that until justice has been satisfied. Thank God that suffering will remove the cause of negativity that you did. You see? So in many ways, thank God that there's rehabilitation, because that's really what it means. If there was no way to rehabilitate, to get rid of a sin, we'd be finished. So these are the primary ways that God deals with justice, you see. Now, that's a very important idea. Remember, whatever you caused to know, and it doesn't make a difference to what degree you are connected to that cause, you must undo, especially in the area of negativity, whatever that is. And there's thousands of ways, that you can negative. Okay? Now, so therefore, that's a very important idea. So whether you caused it or even if you contribute to it remotely, that's still considered a cause that you have to undo. So obviously the last thing you want to do is not cause harm to a multitude of people, right? That's logical, right? The more people you harmed, the worse is your sin, the severity, right? And the greater will be the punishment, which is your atonement, obviously. So that's something very important to consider. Now, the second thing I want to say is the Chofetz Chaim in his Sefer of Chofetz Chaim, which is all about the laws of forbidden communications, slander, and so on. He brings down Rabbi Eliezer HaGodel. Rabbi Eliezer HaGodel was one of the greatest of the Tanoim, and he was the Rebbe of Rabbi Akiva. So could you imagine who he was? And so on, Rabbi Eliezer HaGodel. And he left over a will when he died. The will says the following, and the Chofetz Chaim brings it down. So in many ways, it's scary. What does it say? It says that if you join a group of slanderers, and they're all sitting there talking Lashon Hara, all right? Even if you do nothing, do not contribute to the slander, you're not slandering, you're just sitting with these guys, right, as part of the group. Then in heaven, even though you didn't do anything, you sat there, you are considered an evildoer part of the group, right? That is your label in heaven, because you are in a group that is sinning, and in a certain sense, that's an endorsement of what the group is doing, right? Because that's why you're sitting there. So you are considered a part of a group of evildoers. And that's the last thing you want. You don't want God in heaven to look at you and say, this guy is an evildoer, even if he didn't sin, because he's part of a group, which means that he shared an endorsement, an agreement with what they were doing, tacitly. That's what he did. This is what Rabbi Eliezer says. And that is a very worrisome concept, that even if you don't do anything, but if you're part of a group that is sinning, especially in the area of Lashon Hara, let's say, or choosing to do any evil, you are considered part of the evil group. And therefore, if they are punished, you will be punished along with them. Anyway, that's what he says, Therefore, we can now begin to understand something which is very important. In the olden days, I want to tell you something. If you sin, for instance, let's assume, you sinned against somebody, you stole from the guy. Okay, it's you, the act of stealing, and one guy. So it's a sin, it's one sin. Okay. If you go and sin from a group of people, or rather steal from a group of people, it's obviously worse. Because you stole, but it's from a group of people, you have denied them their ownership, right? That's theft. And therefore, the punishment that you will get, or what you have to undo, is more, obviously, than if it was one victim. But with the advent of the internet, think about this. You decide to talk lashon hara, slander, right, against the person. So in the old days, right, you talked to a guy. You told him what so-and-so did. It was terrible or whatever, or what so-and-so did to him, the receiver, and so on. Okay, so you sinned. There's one guy, right, who now has an impression. How dare this guy do it? The subject of the action and so on. Fine. But you realize today that if you slander somebody on the internet, millions of people are going to hear that. That means you have caused slander to millions of people, which was never true before, never happened before. So literally the internet can bury you, literally, because it will amplify and magnify the severity, right, and the gravity of the sin to an extraordinary amount, which never happened before. That's why the internet is one of the most dangerous places to be on, especially if you lie, you slander, you inform all kinds of, and you lie about people, and people listen and they believe you or whatever. You are in terrible hot water, because the list of victims, or rather the list of people who listen to you, right, is enormous. This never happened before, you see. So therefore, you have to be very careful when you speak on the internet itself. Very careful. Now, let's now begin to understand something. Take an election, okay? I want to show you something which most people don't think about. Let's take an extreme. Hitler, Yamach Shemai V'Zichroi, may his name be blotted out. Because he lived, 55 or 6 million people died in World War II. 6 million of them were Jews. Could you imagine what this man committed? But what happened if you voted for Hitler? Because Hitler was voted in, right? So what happens? Okay? Look at what happens. Because remember, there's a concept called causality, or causation, or contribution. Since you voted for Hitler, I'm assuming you had an idea that this guy, how did he become, in 1933, he became the chancellor and so on. How did he do it? Well, he was vilifying the Jews. Yeah, the Jews, they're the ones who made us poor, right? They're the cause of all evil in the world and so on. Obviously, that was his plug. That was his campaign speech. And you said, right? Yeah, I agree. And you voted for him, right? That means, think about that. In some way, every person that suffered, 56 million people that suffered, whatever the amount of suffering they had, right? You are considered some aspect of cause. Think about that. It may be remote. I mean, you didn't do it. Hitler killed them, or all the Nazis killed them and so on. That's true. But since you endorsed Hitler, you voted for the guy, in the world of causality, you're a cause of some magnitude, of some degree. Now, we cannot measure that degree, because after all, you didn't do it, right? But since you voted for the guy, and you voted for him knowing that he's going to be very bad to the Jews and other groups of people. I mean, he was one of the greatest racists that ever lived, Hitler, right? Then in some way you are a cause, because in some way you contributed to the suffering, the agony, the anguish and the pain of millions and millions of people. Now, do you want this on your record? Think about that. You have any idea what that means? See, and all you did was cast one vote. Now remember, it's all proportionate. Obviously, you can only be blamed for one vote, you know. But like I brought Rabbi Eliezer, if you are part of a group of evildoers, right, and you don't even contribute, but you're there, so in some way you had a measure of culpability or cause, right, you are considered part of the group of evildoers. So even though you didn't do anything to the guy, you didn't kill 56 million people, obviously, but God is absolute in justice. We don't realize that, because once God promulgates a law that what rules the universe is causality, is justice, then he does it fully. It's absolute. He does it totally, you see? So therefore, in some measure, no matter how minute it is, you are guilty of causing the suffering, the agony of 56 million people. Now, of course, he knows the exact amount that you did, but you endorsed Hitler. You voted for the guy. So could you believe voting for him will cause that? It's unbelievable. You see, that's the problem with elections. That if you vote the wrong way, I'm just giving you an extreme example. If you vote the wrong way, right, you are going to be accused on the great judgment day. Why did you vote for this man? So what are you going to say? And you're talking to God, not some angel, right? God is judging you. And he's going to ask you, how do you vote for this guy? Because part of your one vote enabled him, you aided and abetted his ability to create suffering to 56 million people. And God is going to say, this is the amount of cause that you did. So what are you going to say? Well, I didn't know. And God will say, what do you mean you didn't know? He will prove by playing back a recording, video, in full Technicolor, right? Of you saying, wow, I don't care if that's what he's going to do. I want to vote for this guy because he's a great speaker. Or some other ridiculous, idea and so on and so forth. What's your defense? And since we're talking about the suffering of 56 million people, we're not talking about an atonement for one sin. We're talking about suffering of humongous amount of numbers of people. That can endanger your entire eternal life. Got it? This is the problem. It's the problem with anything you do that will create negativity, harm, damage, catastrophe, or whatever. Now, if you can legitimately say, well, I didn't know, fine. So obviously God takes that into account because it's justice, right? But how many things do we do that we do know and really we don't care? Why? Because it didn't happen to me. What do I have to worry? It didn't happen to me. He's doing it to the Jews, or he's doing it to everybody else, the gypsies, or whoever Hitler wants to kill, and so on, you see? Bad news. That means in today's time, because of the internet, or because of elections, you can make a terrible, devastating mistake. And what I'm here is to warn you about that. You see? Very, very important what I'm saying. Right. Now, you may say to me, you need a defense. Because God is going to say, you aided and abetted the suffering of millions of people. Well, I want to now show you something. Okay. Let's take somebody like Harris, or better yet, take somebody like Biden. Okay, it's true. We voted for Biden, or people voted for Biden. I didn't, right? Because I realized who Biden is, But he deceived America, Biden, by hiding out in his basement, and COVID helped him hide out. That we know, and therefore he deceived America. But a great deal of the reason why they voted for Biden is not because of the deception, because they hated Trump. In other words, they felt that hating Trump or not voting for Trump because we hate him, we hate his character, is more important in who to elect. In other words, you've got a choice. If you have somebody, as I will point out, if you have somebody who's competent, really competent, that's one candidate, A. And the second candidate, B, is his character is not good, right? His character is not good. But he's a failure in governing. He's incompetent. But his character is not, he's a nice guy, right? Who do you think you have to vote for? Well, the answer obviously is, well, what are they running for? What job are they running, right? That's what decides. So obviously, right, you're going to vote for somebody who has incredible competence because you want to have a successful life. You want your kids to have a successful life. You want everybody to advance and profit, right? And so on. That's what you want. The other guy has a better character, right? But so what? In this case, it's more important to vote for competence than character. You see? But here's what happened. People, because they hate Trump, has now decided to vote against Trump because of his character. Now, I'm not going into, does Trump have this character? I'm not going into that debate. I personally believe that people, for whatever reason, are tremendously mistaken about his character. Whatever, that he's really honest and so on, and so on. But even if I agreed that his character is seriously wanting, even if I agreed, which I don't, but I would never vote for, because I'm based on that. I would never vote for somebody who is incompetent because I need to survive. I need to flourish. I want my kids to be able to go to college, right? Or whatever you want, go to yeshiva, whatever, right? I want to live a decent life, be able to buy a house and so on, right? What do I care if this guy's a tzaddik? I'm not interested in a president who's a tzaddik, right? That's his responsibility to God. This guy's responsibility to me is, hey, be a good president, right? Safety. We got to be safe. We have to make income. America has to flourish with the opportunity of jobs. There's so many things that are required to govern America, right? Okay, he's happened to be a nice guy, but the guy who's incompetent, who's competent, well, I don't like his character. Okay, right? But should that be the reason for the choice of picking the guy with the good character? Of course not. Let a guy with character is important. I'm not minimizing character. Why? Because you don't want the guy who has a good character, you want him to have a good character, so he won't cheat and be corrupt. That's why you want him to have a good character. Not because you require righteousness. That's him and God. You see? That's the reason why you want a guy with good character. But if this guy has character flaws, whether he be arrogant and so on, or he's selfish, he's self-centered, he's an egomaniac, whatever you want, I don't really care. As long as he rules honestly and he gets me forward. That's my concern, my concern is that he should be good, right? Because I want righteousness in a guy. That's God's concern. That's between him and God. What does that have to do with me? I want this guy to govern well so I can survive and flourish and have a great time, right? And it also has nothing to do if the guy who has good character, right, is also black or Chinese or anything. What does that have to do with competence? In other words, you pick a person in a role that he has to be competent, because that's his responsibility. You pick him for competence, not because of his character. The only reason why you consider character is because you don't want him to be corrupt, which means you will not flourish and survive. You see? But what happens if a guy has proven he's competent and he's done a phenomenal job? And the other guy, I don't know, maybe he's of a certain race, you see, or seems to come across as a nice person. It's nice, Fine, so he'll get points with God. But that's not what I'm looking for. It's elementary. Let me give you a good concrete example. You have shares in a company, okay? Stock market. You have shares in a company, right? You have 10 million shares, right? And they're worth $10 a share. So by my reckoning, that's $100 million, right? Which is whatever, and so on, right? And there are two guys running for the CEO of that company. One of them, let's say candidate A, has been the president in the past, and he has brought the company from $10 a share to $100 a share because he's incredible in running a company, right? So at that point in time, right, you have made not $100 million, you walked away with $1 billion. The other guy, he's a saint. You can talk to him, he's humble, right? He's not a bravado guy and so on. He's gentle and kind, but he's been a failure previously as a CEO of the company. What are you going to vote for? It's obvious. You're not going to vote for the guy who has a good character. Why not? Because what does that have to do with his job? He proved, as long as he proved that he's an incredible person, the guy made me $1 billion, right? What am I, crazy to vote for the guy who is a saint? Okay, so he'll get points with God. What does that have to do with me? I need to make money on the CEO from the company. It's obvious. It depends what the job is. As long as he can do the job. So if he needs a great character to do the job, fine. But if character is irrelevant because the guy who wants to be CEO, who brought it from, $10 a share to $100 a share, he proved his ability. It's no brainer. Why are you going to do that? Because you're thinking of yourself. That's why. Because when it comes to what you want, right, you know what to do. It's a no-brainer. This is the problem with saying, well, the reason why I didn't vote, let's say, for Trump, because of his character. What does that have to do with the presidency and the running of America? You see, especially if he proved what he was. He did a great job, and everybody admits that. The economy was fabulous. The inflation was 1.4%. With Biden, it was 9%. I'm not going to go through a whole list, of what Biden's been doing. But look at the difference. So how could you make a choice when the responsibility is to be a competent president? How can you go through that list, right, and vote for a guy's character, even if you hate him? But he's fabulous as a leader, as somebody who gets the job done, right? Because that's exactly what you would do if the situation was personal, as shares in a company, which is the example I just used. You see? That's why a person's statement, well, I don't like Trump, his character. What does character have to do with it? The only time character really counts, right, is if the guy's going to cheat and be corrupt because of that character. Well, then he won't be competent, right? Because he's going to cheat, right? And it's all about bribery and so on. You see? But other than that, okay. So he is, he brags, or whatever you think he does. What does that have to do with his job? That's the key, you see. Now, well, let's take a look. That's the mistake that everybody's making. But so you made the mistake. Wrong. Because if you vote for somebody that you should realize is incompetent, and that will destroy your ability to advance and flourish, that means that you will have been creating untold suffering for millions of people. Millions of people. Because especially if it's for a president. It's like when they voted for Hitler, right? It wasn't, well, I cast my vote for Hitler, big deal. What are you talking about? Because you were part of the group that cast your vote for Hitler, 56 million people died. You have any idea what, and they didn't just die, they died savagely. And you are held accountable to whatever degree God realizes or knows that you're a cause. Of course it's based on justice. So it obviously has to be proportionate to the level of causality and so on. Let's take a look based on what I'm saying. Remember, elections are very dangerous because if God says to you, how do you vote for this guy when you knew that he would cause incredible suffering to people? What are you going to answer? You see? So what are you going to say? Well, because the guy looked like a nice guy. So God is going to say, nice guy, who cares? The job of what he was running for required tremendous knowledge and skill of being effective as a leader, right? And as a president. That was your responsibility. So how do you go and vote for a guy with an asset that has nothing to do with his job? Since you knew what he was. Well, what are you going to answer? Bad news. Because if you vote for the wrong guy and you knew the idea that it's because you hate the competent guy, you are in big trouble. And that's what I'm here to warn you. Because you will have created untold suffering, not only for yourself and for your family, but for the entire United States. Well, let me get real. Let me show you what I mean. It's very important to understand what the repercussions are, what the consequences are in this election. Okay, let's take a look first at Biden, then at Harris. Well, I don't know much about Biden. He deceived us all because he ran from his basement. Did he? Okay. So maybe you could say, but many people, or I think most people, the reason why they voted for Biden, because they hate Trump. There you go. It's the character that determined their vote, not the competence. Why? How do we know? Because Trump was president for 4 years before Biden. And he did a great job. Everybody knows that. Those are facts. You can't argue with the facts. Okay? And just because you hate the guy for whatever reason, that doesn't justify voting for a guy that basically, what did he do? What did Biden do? And not only that, look at what he did when you did vote for him. Let me show you the suffering that this man has created with 330 million Americans. Let me show you. One, illegal immigrants. You want to understand what that means? It's not just that he allows people unvetted illegally to enter the United States. Do you know that that is treason? I think it's treason. It's unconstitutional. He is breaking the law. You're not allowed to do that. The Constitution requires a legal entry. So how can you, as a president who's sworn in to uphold the Constitution, violate that document? You're a criminal. In fact, I think it borders on, if not outright, it's treason, as I will show you. So that's the first idea, you see, in terms of what he's done, right? So it's a constitutional crime for which he should have been impeached a long time ago. That's number one. Number two, do you know what's going on in the border? Slavery, human trafficking, right? Do you know how many people are being kidnapped by the cartels and by Americans to be slaves? Okay, why? Because of illegal entry. But who's responsible for that? Biden. Not only that, what about sex crimes? You know how many people are used and abused for that, right? You have any idea what it means for a 10-year-old kid to be a sex object by somebody because of somebody who came into the United States illegally? You have any idea the suffering that goes on, right? Did you know that 325,000 kids are missing? It's not my statistics. This is what they're saying. 325,000 kids are missing. Yeah, because they're all being sold as slaves of some sort. You see, who's responsible for that suffering? You see, and what about fentanyl? There's a mass, input in the United States of fentanyl. It's in all the cities. I mean, it doesn't take much to get the statistics. Just look it up on the internet. Fentanyl is all over. 150,000 American citizens die from fentanyl. that has come in from Mexico and ultimately from China. But wait a minute, who is responsible for their death? And the answer is Biden, because his job is to stop the fentanyl entry. But he doesn't do anything. Not only that, he encourages it because he allows the illegal entry. That makes him a murderer. Do you understand what that means? You can't fool God and say, well, he didn't murder the people. What are you talking about? If his job is to stop people from bringing on fentanyl, and because he doesn't do his job, they come in, he is called a contributory cause. In whatever degree, he didn't murder the kid, that's true, but that's a contribution. Like I said, and God judges that degree. Do you have any idea what his judgment will be? Just on that alone, you see? And then the new ICE statistics. Do you know that they estimate, or however they know, 13,000 people who entered the United States have been convicted of murder. Murder! And they're now all over the United States and nobody knows where they are. And guess what? I would imagine it's very likely that they're committing murders again. A murderer convicted of murder. Then there's another 400,000 people, illegal entries, that have been convicted of some other crime, right? Even if it's not murder. It's incredible. You have any idea who's walking around the United States? Right. But this is Biden's responsibility. You're talking about sins and so on. We all know about the Venezuelan gangs. It's unbelievable. They're taking over apartment buildings and so on. And they will kill you. These guys are incredibly vicious. You know, why are they here? What are they doing here? They were never vetted by anybody. Yet, you know how much crime is committed by Venezuelans and the other gangs that are coming in illegally and so on? You see? And we don't even know how many terrorists have come in. Everybody says it's not a matter of if, it's only when that there has to be another 9/11. Why? Because there are hundreds of thousands of terrorists in the United States because of the illegal immigration. So I've told you one facet of what Biden has done, right? And guess what? Who's going to pay back for all the suffering, for all the people that were affected by the illegal entry? That's one. What about abortion? Biden is completely for abortion. You know what abortion is? And I asked once some doctor, how do they do it? You see, I don't even want to describe where they stick a needle into the kid's brain and suck out his brains. It's beyond belief. It's murder, because that kid is about to be born. Yet Biden is completely for it, and so is Harris. She's called the abortion queen. Who's going to pay for the murder of all these kids, right? Then you have all the city crimes. Check out New York, Manhattan. You know, people don't go on the subways anymore, right? Because they don't want to be mugged on the subways. You know, there are people walking the streets. Some guy walks over to them and punches them in the face out of nowhere. You see? Well, how could you allow this? This makes no sense. You see? So who is going to pay? And what about all the shoplifting? All the shoplifting in all the cities? Well, make sure that you have a calculator with you, and that as long as it's below $1,000, go right ahead and steal. What is that? How do you even do that? There's no deterrent to crime. It's not punished. So cops don't even stop these people anymore. But who's responsible for this social disorder, right? We're all looking at Biden, which is absolutely incredible. But what is the sin of Biden? Here's the problem. It's not a sin. It's unbelievable suffering. And what about the inflation? Right? You have any idea? And now let me tell you something which you're going to find it hard to believe. Imagine somebody walks in who's trying to support his family. And he goes in and he wants to buy groceries. Takes a look at the price. And like they say in Yiddish, schapt him the hearts. All of a sudden, he gets anxious because he realizes I cannot afford half the stuff on my list. That's how much price. Do you realize that that's pain? That is pain. Who caused the inflation? Well, if he came in with a 1.9% and he jacked it up to 9%, who is responsible? Why? Because he hates Trump. So anything Trump did is terrible. How do you do that? You see, I mean, on the first day, I think he had over 80 executive orders against Trump. For what? Because you hate the guy? Are you crazy? Right? So who's the cause of this man all of a sudden becoming incredibly anxious? Right? How much pain is that? But it's anxiety. When he looks at the price bill of what these goods cost, and he knows he can't afford it. And what happens when he receives his mortgage bill, his rent bill, his insurance bill, right? And he realizes, I can't afford it. Or a kid wants to buy a house, not a kid, but a young adult wants to buy a house, and he realizes, I can't buy a house if the interest rates are 7%. It's impossible, you see? So that's suffering. What is the suffering? That I can't survive this way. More than half America live from paycheck to paycheck. And God forbid if there was ever some type of emergency, they'd be finished. I once heard a statistic, it's hard to believe, that at least 49% of Americans don't have more than $50 savings. That's what I once heard the statistics. You know what that means to have only $50 in your bank account for anything that occurs? You have any idea what the anxiety is? Of course you do. Because you live for this, you live through this nonsense. But who caused it? For what reason? Good old Joe Biden. But wait a minute. That means he caused unbelievable suffering. Right? You don't think that suffering that he caused, God doesn't count at all? We're looking at the suffering of 330 million people in whatever degree it is. Well, who pays for that? You don't think God is going to look at the suffering needlessly of everybody, every human? Of course he does. But people don't realize that. They don't understand how God, and not only that, they're all advancing the LGBTQ plus, all right? That's the incredible decay of society, right? And what about transgender? And they want to take away the parental authority, right? You don't have to tell the parents. On the contrary, the kid can sue the parents as far as I know in California. You're not even allowed to tell the parents. Could you believe that these people have the gall to take away parental authority if they want to change the gender or the sex of their child? You believe this? This is unheard in human society, that this is what the country has become. Who's promoting this? Biden and Harris, right? This is what we see, right? What about your gas? Every time you stop at a gas pump and you're looking at high prices, right? It's the same thing. You're anxious, especially if you travel for your job and so on. Then there's other things that the America used to be what? America used to be the cop of America, of the world, right? Many people wanted to do evil. Why didn't they do it? Because they knew America would not allow it, right? America was a tremendous deterrent in an enormous amount of crimes and catastrophes that could have been committed by many, many tyrants and dictators, right? Now nothing. Now you have the evil cockroaches coming out where they're coming out because they're not afraid of America. America has become the laughing stock, you see? You know how many people are worried about that? Where they realize that, wait a minute, without America, right, who knows what this world will turn into? That's anxiety. That's suffering. Remember, every person is responsible for 1 nanosecond of suffering of another person. That's justice. And God knows the exact degree that you contributed, right? I mean, just as a classic example, Afghanistan. How does America leave Afghanistan with its tail between its legs? It's unbelievable. And it's not only the 13 people that died needlessly, because the guy or the sniper had this guy who detonated the bomb in his sights. He was waiting for the okay and never came. What kind of a competence in that? You see? And they left the world in tremendous danger because they left back $86 billion in armaments. That's suicide. And they gave back the Bagram Air Base. Who's responsible for these idiotic decisions? And that causes tremendous anxiety and fear among people. Who's going to pay for that fear that people have, that Biden committed? Just one classic example, you see. And what about the betrayal of Israel? Thank God America gave them some things. But how does America give money to Iran? You know how many people Iran killed because of the money that Biden gave them? Right? Killing, right? It was Biden's money to Iran. They were broke in the time of Trump. You don't think God sees this? That means what Biden gave them in Obama enabled Iran, caused them, that's a cause in some measure, right, to kill October 7th. Not only that, what about the entire world? They have all their agents killing people or committing enormous evil, right? That's suffering. Who decides? Who is responsible for that suffering? And Iran is an enemy of the entire world. Everybody knows that. So how do these people give money to Iran to commit all this evil? You see. And what about all the suffering? It's absolutely unbelievable. You see. And not only that, what about all the anti-Semitism? Are they doing anything? Are they confronting all the colleges? Is that what Biden does? Is that what Harris does? Of course not. Yet this is a very serious problem. There are people that compare what's happening in America, right? They compare it to 1933 in Germany. They've never seen such a rise in anti-Semitism. Well, who's responsible for that hatred? Of course, the president. Who else? And so on. You see, that's what we know about Biden. You see. So even if you hate Trump, how do you do this? How do you vote for a man that is so thoroughly, I'm not even talking about the bribery that Biden took and his son from communist China, right? I'm not even talking about the bribery that's proven, how much money they took from China. You see, that's treason. So how do you vote for either him, and now let's talk about Harris, right? Say, well, I hate Trump. Harris? But everybody knows what Harris is. She's proven it in the last month or whatever, right? Just take a look at this. You talk about competence. What did she do for 6 years in the Senate? Nothing. What did she do for 3.5 years as VP, as vice president? Nothing. Not only that, she voted for everything that Biden wanted. In fact, and this is the kicker, they asked her, what would you do different than Biden? Because you're running on a ticket for change. She said nothing, which means she would duplicate and replicate exactly what Biden did. But Biden has caused unbelievable suffering to the American people. You see? So you know she's incompetent. She does word salads all the time. She never gives interviews because she has nothing to say. She's done nothing. Why would anybody vote? Because remember, a president of the United States basically is a CEO, a chief executive officer of a company, right? That's really what it is. And by the way, as an aside, that's why the one who should be president is somebody who has a business experience, right? And not a lawyer. That's the mistake America always makes, is they make a lawyer a president. No, it should be a business executive that knows the bottom line, right? Because these are the guys who know exactly what to do and how to correct it. Okay, that was an aside. But all I'm saying is that, what has she done? Nothing. So they see in the last couple of weeks, she says nothing. Because what does she know? She's incompetent. You have any idea what Putin, if he ever meets with her, right? Putin, if he meets with her, or whatever, and all these guys, they're going to eat her for breakfast. That's what they're going to make mincemeat out of her, because they see what she is. She knows nothing, you see, and forget about her ability to decide, and so on. So the question is, okay, you hate Trump, but why would you put somebody that's completely incompetent? And Trump has proven himself for 4 years what he could do for America. I mean, what are you going to answer to God? Because God is going to say, let me show you what you contributed to as a true cause. And he's going to give you a list. Does anybody want to face the Almighty God that knows everything? And he's going to show you all the suffering that you were responsible for, even if you didn't directly cause it. Of course not. So what are you going to tell him? Well, I don't like his character. Excuse me, he's not running for tzidkus. He's not running for righteousness or to get it, right? He's running to govern the United States adequately, you see? To help you and your family and so on. So what does it have to do with character? As long as he's not a character that won't corrupt his loyalty and his allegiance, fine. Okay, so so he goes home and does whatever he does, and so on, cheats at cards. I mean, whatever these guys do and so on. What does that have to do with running the United States? And is anybody a tzaddik? Really? You know how many American presidents had scandals in terms of who they are? There are many books written on this, right? A president isn't a tzaddik. He's not a saint, as they would say in English. He's not a righteous person necessarily. Many of them are corrupt. They are incompetent and they still become president. I didn't want to go into the roster of how many people there are and so on, you see. In any case, this is the problem. You don't realize if God charges you, how do you contribute to the suffering of 330 million Americans? And I will tell you what you knew, because I know what you know. You can't fool me. And I would say, so when you tell him, well, I didn't like his character because he brags, he's too vile on the internet, he's always responding. Excuse me, okay. But would that corrupt his ability to govern? No. He was president for 4 years. He did a magnificent job. He saved his country so many different ways. He confronted the foreign affairs and so on. China, he brought back so much manufacturing. I mean, I don't want to go through the list of what he did. We all know. You can easily check it out on the internet. What are the accomplishments of Trump in his 4 years? So how do you compare that to the character of either of these people, Biden or Harris? I mean, where is your logic? Yeah, of course. So when it comes to earning shares, you knew to vote for. You didn't care if the other guy was a saint, or he was black, or he was Asian, right? Or he was Hispanic, right? Right? Of course you voted for the guy who could make you the prophet. So you're a hypocrite. So why'd you do this to the United States? What are you going to stand on? Nothing. But here's the problem. The problem is, like I said, in the old days, if you do a sin and you cause suffering, okay, it's to one person. A person can say he can live with the atonement of that one person. We're talking here about 330 million Americans. And what about the rest of the world, right? That's what the internet is. That's what an election is. Why are you going to answer that? You can't. And therefore, your entire eternity is endangered, right? That's what I'm telling you. Your entire eternity, Olam Habo, is threatened because of the amount of suffering that you have caused. People don't realize that. That's what they're going to face. You have no idea of what the great day of judgment is going to look like to so many millions of people. Because, God is going to look at them and he's going to indict every one of them, and they don't have a leg to stand on, right? Because in their heart, they know they were wrong. And so the only time a person can stand up to that accusation, if they truly believed Harris was incredibly competent, right? But if you vote for her because, well, now it's a black's turn to be president. What do you mean? He was president, Obama. I hated Trump. That's not a defense, you see. And therefore, in many ways, you don't realize the danger you're in. Because the amount of victims that you will have contributed, the damage is enormous. This is the problem. You have to be very careful. So therefore, please, you just take a look at what is happening and so on, Listen, you don't want to vote for Trump. Okay. You hate Trump. Okay. I'm not going to convince you that Trump is the right guy. I have my personal feelings. I think he is. But I don't want to convince you. Okay. So stay home. Don't vote. So at least God can't say, why did you vote? Because like Rabbi Eliezer said, you will be considered among the group of evildoers, even if you did nothing. Stay home. Do yourself a favor. You want eternal life? Do yourself a favor. Stay home. At least God cannot accuse you of joining the evil group or contributing to the suffering of 330 million people. That is my advice. You see? Now, I usually don't do this. I'm out of character, actually. I usually don't give a shir where I actually warn you about what's about to happen and so on. But I felt that, wait a minute, I don't want God coming to me and saying, excuse me, you knew what would happen because you are Bal Hashkafa. You learn Hashkafa. You know how I run my world. So excuse me, why didn't you warn the people? What am I going to answer him? He's right. So I said to myself, I got to warn the people. Now, I did my job. You want to listen to me? Fine. But remember, you're playing around with your eternity, an infinite bliss eternally. That's what you're playing around. Because like I said, we live in a time that never happened before, where you get on the internet and you slander somebody, you can have 50 million people listen to that slander. You're finished. Because how are you going to undo all the lashon hara that these people believed? You won't. You see? And there's not enough time to reincarnate, come back, and atone for what you did. There isn't time, because the Mashiach is right around the corner. So please, for your own sake, stay home. If that's what you feel. Or you could say, hey, this guy has a point. If I was going to vote a company that has shares, right? He's right. I would never vote for the CEO that looks good, sounds nice, right? Or invites me to tea. What does that have to do with the company making profit? Nothing. I want to vote for the guy who, he lives a little shady, but he's proved himself to be a phenomenal CEO, So I don't care if he cheats on poker when he goes home, or whatever, or doesn't take out his wife enough times. I don't care, right? Or whatever you consider not good, right? And so on, Or I don't care that he has a social site that he talks against people that, that criticize him and so on. Or I don't like his language. That's not the consideration here. What you need to do is what the person is running for. And that is to govern adequately, sufficiently, professionally. Somebody who has proven that he can govern the United States, and even more than that. We live in a very evil time. You don't realize how bad this time is. In Chazal, this would be the Memtesh Shai Tumah, 49 levels of evil. One of the great things about Trump is this, that he can defy evil. Many people cannot defy evil. In other words, they realize evil is wrong, obviously, and they won't practice evil, that's true, but they can't bring it down. They cannot defy. One of the reasons, which I've said before, that God has allowed the Democratic Party, which is incredibly evil, to do this to Trump, is to do what? To try to, whatever, try to either kill him, bankrupt him, degrade him, demoralize him, you name it, right? All the indictments against him is to infuriate Trump, to destroy evil. Because we are at that stage, you see? And therefore, he infuriated Trump to change, to defy the Democratic Party, right? That's one of the reasons why. That's the logic behind why Trump went through an unbelievable, experience of government. The whole government was arrayed against them. The CIA, the FBI, the IRS, the Department of Justice, the Secret Service. It's beyond belief how they've arrayed the entire government against this one man. The miracle is he survives. And that is an act of God, because no man could survive. No man. And he's 78. Where does he get the energy to run around? You think about it. Could you run around for the last half year? Every day another stop, right? How much sleep can you get? And not only that, he doesn't have a teleprompter. He's in incredible health. Why? Because God wants him to run and to win. Therefore, I decided that I have to give this shir as a chesed to tell you what you're about to enter and what you're about to be involved in. Be very careful, because the amount of suffering you can create, even your vote isn't the deciding vote, obviously not. But it doesn't make a difference. Like Rabbi Eliezer said to his son in the will, don't sit with any group of evildoers, even if you don't do anything. Because the sitting itself is a contribution. It's an endorsement. You have to be very careful. And the last thing you want is when heaven looks at you, all the angels, they're going to look at you and say, you're an evildoer. You're part of an evil group. Is that what you want? God forbid. So be very careful. You don't want to vote for Trump? That's your business. Stay home. Don't vote for Harris. Because if she turns out to be, which she will turn out to be, if she wins, I feel sorry for every one of you out there who voted for her. Because you will have contributed to the evil and the suffering, the agony, the anguish. Because she's anyway a communist. She's going to change this country in a way that you won't even, your head can't even spin to realize what she will do. I'm not even talking about the fact that she wants to raise the taxes on everybody, the capital gains tax. I'm not going to go into the list and so on. This can all be checked out, You will have endorsed and contributed to enormous amount of suffering. Even if your vote isn't the deciding vote, you never know. It's so tight, it may be the deciding vote. You see, that's how tight this race is and so on, So be careful. I wish all of you tremendous hatzlacha, and just think about what I've said. And even if you disagree with me, ask yourself, why do I disagree with him? Is what he's saying, does it really make sense? Please, for your own sake, for your family's sake, and for the sake for your own eternity. Thank you.